She slid a note under my hotel room door at 11:30 at night, 3 days into what was supposed to be the best trip of my life. I almost didn't read it. I thought it was a housekeeping card or one of those promotional flyers about the resort spa. But something made me pick it up. Maybe the fact that it had been pushed so deliberately, slowly, like whoever sent it wanted to make sure it didn't make a sound. Your husband is not here for you. Check his phone before you go to sleep. I'm sorry, no name, no room number, just that. My name is Sylvie Beaumont, and 3 days ago I had married the man I believed was the love of my life. We were honeymooning at a private resort in Sedona, Arizona. Red rock cliffs, turquoise pools, $400 a night, the whole thing. My husband, who I'll call just that, my husband, had booked it as a surprise. He said I deserved the best. He said he wanted our first week as a married couple to feel like a dream. It did feel like a dream. Right up until that note. I stood in the bathroom with the door locked, reading those 2 sentences over and over. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. I think some part of me, buried under years of trusting and choosing not to look too closely, already knew. We had been together for 2 years before the wedding. Met through mutual friends at a cookout in Nashville, where I'd burned my hand on a grill, and he'd appeared out of nowhere with ice and the most disarming smile I'd ever seen on a grown man. He was charming in the way that feels effortless, the kind of person who remembers your coffee order and your mother's birthday and the name of the street you grew up on. Maybe too fast. My best friend told me once, gently, that I should slow down, that I was filling in blanks he hadn't actually answered. I told her she was overthinking it. I was the one not thinking enough. His phone was on the nightstand. He was asleep, breathing steadily, one arm thrown over his face the way he always slept. I looked at him for a long moment before I picked it up. I knew his passcode. He'd given it to me 8 months into dating, made a little ceremony out of it, said he hadn't to hide I'd never used it. I hadn't needed to. Or I hadn't wanted to. I used it now. The first thing I saw was a thread I didn't recognize. A contact saved as TW, initials only. The last message was from that afternoon, sent while I was getting a massage at the resort spa, while he'd told me he was going to take a nap. She signed anything yet? His reply, not yet. Waiting until she's relaxed. Probably tomorrow. I sat down on the edge of the tub because my legs stopped working correctly. I scrolled up. The thread went back 4 months. 4 months. We were engaged 4 months ago. We had just put down the deposit on our apartment in Franklin, Tennessee, the one with the big kitchen and the backyard he said we'd eventually turn into a garden. 4 months ago I was ordering wedding invitations and choosing between 2 shades of white for table linens. And he was texting TW. The further back I scrolled, the worse it got. She has a trust from her grandfather. Substantial. Once we're married, I can get added as a co-trustee if she signs the amendment. Does she know what she'd be signing? She trusts me completely. That's the whole point. I stopped reading. Not because I couldn't take it. I could. Something had gone very quiet in my chest, the kind of quiet that comes after a loud thing breaks. I could take it because I suddenly understood that taking it was not the same thing as accepting it. I pulled up my own phone. I opened the Notes app, and I screenshotted every single message in that thread. Then I went back further, found a separate thread, same contact, older messages, a different number, and screenshotted those too. Then I went to his email, which I'd also never touched, and I found a draft folder that nearly made me throw up. Drafted but not sent. A message to an attorney. Subject line. Amendment to Beaumont Family Trust, Spousal Co-Trustee Edition. My grandfather had left me a trust, not enormous but significant, $240,000, released to me in full when I turned 30, which I had done 8 months ago. It was sitting in a separate account under my maiden name, exactly where my grandfather's estate attorney had advised me to keep it. I had told my husband about it early in our relationship, because I didn't believe in hiding things from the person you love. He had been planning this since before he proposed. I put his phone back exactly where I found him. I straightened the charger cable. I got back into bed. I lay there in the dark, listening to him breathe. This man I had married 72 hours ago, and I felt something cold and clear settle over me like a second skin. He thought I was naive. He thought I was soft. He thought I was the kind of woman who would hand him the keys to everything she had because she believed in love. He had no idea who I actually was. I grew up watching my mother navigate a brutal divorce when I was 11 years old. My father had tried something not entirely unlike this, moving money, obscuring accounts, hiding assets before the papers were filed. My mother had caught on because she was smarter than he gave her credit for, and she had a lawyer who was smarter still. I watched her fight for 3 years. I watched her win. And I watched her sit me down at the kitchen table afterward and say, "Sylvie, never let anyone love you into carelessness." I had let that happen, but I was not going to let it finish. In the morning I woke up before he did, ordered room service for both of us, and smiled when he came out of the bathroom looking sleep-warm and easy. I handed him coffee. I kissed him on the cheek. I told him I wanted to take a hike later, maybe that trail we'd seen from the car. He looked at me with those eyes I'd spent 2 years thinking I knew, and he said that sounded perfect. "Actually," I said, as casually as I could manage with a heart rate running about 15 beats too fast, "I've been thinking about that paperwork you mentioned. The trust amendment. Maybe we should handle it today just so it's off our plates." He paused. Just for half a second. "Really? I thought you wanted to wait until we got home." "I changed my mind," I said. "I want everything to feel settled." He covered his hand over mine on the table. "I love you," he said. "I know," I said. That was the moment I knew exactly what kind of woman I was going to be for the rest of this story. While he showered, I stepped outside onto the balcony and made 2 calls. The first was to my grandfather's estate attorney, a woman named Patricia, who had handled the trust since I was 19, and who I had called exactly twice before, both times about routine paperwork. I spoke quietly and told her what I knew. She did not panic. She asked 4 precise questions. Then she said, "Don't sign anything, I'll handle the rest." The second call was to my oldest friend, the one who had tried to warn me. She answered on the second ring even though it was 7 in the morning. "I need you to do something for me," I said. "Name it. I need you to find out who TW is." She was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. "How long have you known?" "Since last night." "Okay," she said. "Give me 2 hours." She called back in 90 minutes. TW was a woman named, and I will not use her real name here, but she had been in a relationship with my husband for approximately 8 months before he and I met. She was a paralegal. Which explained, with horrifying clarity, exactly where the language in those drafted emails had come from. Trust Amendment. Co-trustee edition. The phrasing had been precise and knowledgeable in a way that should have struck me as odd if I had ever seen it, which I hadn't, because I hadn't looked. She hadn't disappeared from his life when he started dating me. She had just changed roles. Consultant. Silent partner. Whatever you want to call it when someone helps the person they love figure out how to steal from the person he's pretending to love. My friend also found something else. A pattern. A woman in Memphis who had dated my husband for 14 months 4 years back. A brief engagement that ended when she discovered, after the fact, that he had attempted to gain access to a savings account she'd inherited from her aunt. He hadn't succeeded. She hadn't pressed charges. She just moved on and tried to forget it. He had not counted on me, having a friend who was a paralegal herself, working for a litigation firm in Nashville, with access to public court records and absolutely no patience for men like him. I spent the rest of that morning at the resort while he went on the hike I declined, claiming a headache. I sat in a chair by the pool in my sundress and my sunglasses, looking completely relaxed, and I built a folder on my phone of everything I had: the screenshots, my friend's notes, the name of the woman in Memphis, and her contact information, which I fully intended to share with my attorney. When he came back from the hike, cheeks flushed, hair sweaty, looking healthy and uncomplicated and completely unsuspecting, I smiled at him and said I was feeling better. "I called the resort concierge," I told him. "They have a little business center we can use. We could do the paperwork there this afternoon if you want. More official that way." He agreed immediately. Of course, he did. This was the moment he'd been building toward for months. We walked down together, his hand in mine, sunlight coming through the lobby windows in long warm slants. He held the door. He smiled at the woman at the front desk. He was very good at being charming. I had to give him that. But when we walked into the small conference room the concierge had arranged, he was not expecting what was already waiting there. My grandfather's estate attorney had, in 90 minutes, arranged for a colleague of hers who worked in Scottsdale to meet us with a video call pulled up on a laptop. Standing beside the laptop was a woman I had called that morning, a local notary with a calm face and a notepad. And sitting at the table with a cup of coffee going cold beside her was a woman I did not know, who introduced herself as a forensic financial specialist and set a manila folder on the table without explanation. My husband stopped walking. "Sylvie," he said quietly, "what is this?" "Paperwork," I said. "You wanted to get it sorted." He looked at the screen. He looked at the woman with the folder. He looked at me. "The trust amendment you drafted," I said, keeping my voice even. "The one in your email drafts folder. The one you were planning to present to me after a few more days of red rocks and room service. It's not executable." My grandfather's attorney explains that better than I do, but the short version is, any co-trustee addition requires written approval from two independent parties and a 30-day review period. His words, not mine, Sylvie. "Also," I continued, "the account is held under my pre-marriage name at a credit union in Tennessee, which means marital property law in our state wouldn't have touched it anyway, but I'm guessing TW missed that part." The color left his face. "I found the messages," I said. "I found the draft emails. I found the woman in Memphis. And I want you to understand something before you say another word. Everything I just told you is already in the hands of my attorney, and none of it is going away." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You set me up. You set yourself up," I said. I just stopped getting out of the way. He tried, for about 20 minutes, to reframe it. He said TW was an old friend. He said the emails were hypothetical, exploratory, that he'd never actually intended to file anything. He said I was misreading a private conversation between two people who cared about me. He said the word love 4 times in 10 minutes, which was more times than he'd said it in the previous month combined. And each time it landed in the room like something hollow. My attorney's colleague on the screen let him speak. She did not interrupt. When he finished, she said, in the most professionally pleasant voice I have ever heard, "Sir, drafted legal documents are not hypothetical. Intent is a documented element of fraud. And what you've described and what has been documented qualifies as attempted financial fraud under Tennessee statutes. I'd recommend you stop talking and call your own attorney." He stopped talking. What came next was not dramatic. There was no screaming. Nobody threw anything. He signed the annulment documents 2 days later at a law office in Phoenix, across a table from a notary and both of our attorneys, and the whole thing took less than 40 minutes. He didn't look at me when he signed. I didn't need him to. What I had not told him yet, and this is the part that I kept to myself until it was already done, was that TW had been contacted by my attorney as a material witness. She had her own exposure in this, and her own employer had been made quietly aware of the situation. Paralegals who assist in drafting fraudulent documents don't tend to keep their jobs for very long once the right people know about it. I hadn't pressed for that. I hadn't needed to. I had simply provided documentation and let the process do what the process does. 3 weeks after I flew home from Sedona alone, with my trust intact and my name unchanged on everything that mattered, I got a text from an unknown number. The note was from me. I was at the resort that weekend. I knew him from before. "I thought someone should warn you. I hope you're okay." I sat with that message for a long time. There are people in this world who see something wrong happening and decide it's not their business. And there are people who slide a note under a stranger's door at 11:30 at night because they can't quite live with themselves if they don't. I don't know who she was. I never will. But I texted back 2 words and I meant them completely. "Thank you." My mother called me a week after I got home, when I had finally told her the whole story. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said exactly what I knew she was going to say, because she's my mother and she has always known me better than I know myself. "You didn't break," she said. "No," I said. "Good," she said. And then, because she is who she is, she told me she'd found a really good contractor, and we were finally going to renovate her kitchen. And did I want to come down for the weekend, and she'd make that chicken stew I'd been asking about since November. I said yes. I booked the train ticket that same night. Some people find out what they're made of in a crisis. Some people already knew, because they watched their mother build herself back from nothing at a kitchen table in a house that felt too quiet, and they made a quiet promise to themselves that they would not forget what that looked like. I did not forget. I just had to remember it at the right moment.